Hello, welcome to BizSec Podcast. I am Beau Woods.
This is Dave Kennedy.
Each episode, we're going to be talking about information and technology security issues that matter to business people, not just to the technologists. So, hey, Dave, what's the latest with you?
Well, I'm currently hiding in my basement away from all the kids that are upstairs running around like mad, so that's about the latest with me.
All right, good stuff. How's the planning for DerbyCon going?
Exhausting. I think Aaron has been the most exhausted with it, but we're in the home stretch here, and 2 weeks to go.
Good stuff. I'm looking forward to being up there in Louisville for it.
Be great.
So this week on Monday, I was on the Down the Rabbit Hole podcast with Rafael Los, aka White Rabbit. Don't know if you guys listen to that podcast, but it's a good one where he also takes on security business issues, stuff that matter to business folks. And wanted to give him a shout out, say thanks for letting me be on, and hopefully maybe we can wrangle him into our podcast sometime. If you're not listening to it, tuning in. And he also has the SecBiz group on LinkedIn that he runs. So check that out if you're active on LinkedIn.
And it's funny. I was actually just hanging out with Raph last week. I think we're in Minnesota. I think all the states now are blurring as much as I travel. But yeah, so I got to hang out with Raph, and we are actually we were like one or two gates away. So we sat there and had some dinner and all that good stuff. So a great guy.
Gotcha. Was that at the United Security Summit or whatever it was?
No, it was for a conference for a customer, basically.
Okay.
A organization that was having kind of a private conference. So, Raph was part of that. I was part of that. A few other folks as well.
Okay, cool.
It was fun. Yeah, good times. Good people.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in this week. We talked about what we wanted to discuss on the podcast, and with the most recent revelations around the NSA, you can call it domestic or overseas spying programs that they've been putting on. A lot of people are calling it that. Some people just refer to it as the Edward Snowden leaks. But whatever you call it, this week news was released that the NSA has been actively subverting cryptography technologies and standards, intentionally weakening them so that it's easier for them to be able to eavesdrop on communications that are encrypted or to access files and file systems that are encrypted. And so we wanted to dive in and tackle that, again, from a business perspective. What does this mean for a company, for a Fortune 500 or for a very small regional organization that relies on cryptography? How does this revelation affect you? And so there have been lots and lots of stories about that. We don't want to rehash any particular stories, but we do want to kind of take on the topic and take a look at it. So we're going to kind of go through a few different topics today. The first one is how they were able to do it technically. We still don't have all the details. All the details haven't been released. Maybe somebody's got them all at this point in the public, but it hasn't made its way out to the general public. Second, how much should you care? Why should you care? Should you care at all? Third, what does it mean for protecting intellectual property? Most companies' big worry is that. And what does it mean for compliance or other areas of protection that you might need to have with strong cryptography?
Well, let's actually take a look at this and what it actually means. Personally, so if the NSA has these capabilities, and we know that China has a very capable information warfare capability, we know that Russia has a very information warfare capability. I mean, does this mean, typically that, other government agencies have the same type of capabilities? And if so, that's definitely a huge risk when it comes to the type of information that we have either in the cloud or what we're actually housing in our infrastructure or data centers abroad. So I think these implications, if you look at it, while it's coming out with NSA and with what's going on with Snowden or what's been released with EFF, it definitely starts to pose a big risk toward the actual type of data we're protecting, the encryption that we're using, and ultimately what we're doing to secure that. In stating that, they said that the NSA weakened the NIST standards, right? So if we go off of NIST, are we using weak standards that actually don't provide a level of assurance that our information is actually protected? That brings up some really hairy questions, especially for us in the security industry, of what the heck do we even do now?
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's because they haven't released how it's been done. Um, we've got to take a lot of guesses. But one of the conjectures that I kind of have in my mind, and Dave, you can tell me whether or not you think I'm right or crazy or you don't know. But because the NSA kind of has a dual role, they have to protect as well as attack, if you will. Protect domestically the government organizations and government protections of the data and the information assets. Plus, they have to try and infiltrate or eavesdrop on other communications, foreign or domestic, to figure out whether or not bad things are going to happen or get that data. So, one of the things that comes to mind that you might do if you were in that position, keeping those two very different goals in mind, is you might figure out some way to weaken the standards in a way that you knew you could break, but that would be really, really hard for anybody else to break. So one of the examples that I've heard kind of thrown around a little bit is that they might add something into the crypto standards that when you implement that, it allows you to kind of crack it if you have tons of technology and money to throw at the problem, as the NSA does, and we've seen that from some other leaks. But anybody with less than, say, $100 million a year to spend on the cracking program wouldn't be able to feasibly break it within the usable lifetime of the information. So that's one way that they could do it, and I'm kind of leaning towards, my best case scenario, I guess, is that that's what they've done. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, I personally think that if you look at the type of things that have come out, I think that they definitely have been able to break a large amount of the encryption. I think a lot of that comes from just the massive amount of processing power that they have, the massive amount of infrastructure that they have there to be able to crunch those. I mean, I came from that type of arena, and they have some brilliant mathematicians there that are sitting there nonstop figuring out different ways of getting around cryptography. So I think that's definitely, from a pure math perspective, I think it's possible. I also think that placing backdoors into encryption grades and things that they've helped engineer are also very possible too.
Yeah, and I know that one of the other things we've seen with the leaks coming out is that there are several companies who have aided the law enforcement agencies, particularly the NSA, in providing information, kind of opening up their doors to law enforcement agencies a little bit more. One of those, interestingly, I'll kind of pick on this a little bit, is Microsoft has done that. Now that Microsoft owns Skype, and Skype is built into Outlook and into Link, which is what a lot of organizations use as their corporate communication systems, I wonder what the potential impact, or at least what the concern level is for a lot of the organizations that do depend on those kind of teleworking facilities and remote connectivity facilities to be able to safely and securely talk to each other if they know that somebody could be listening in. Potentially the NSA, potentially, as we've seen, the UK government has done some things as well. Maybe there's something that other governments, maybe a little bit less friendly to American business interests, could have been doing, and what the concern level is for organizations. Have you heard anything from your contacts about that?
Well, you mentioned Microsoft, and actually recently the German government actually slammed Microsoft for their TPM modules, for TPM 2.0. And basically what happens, is the German government's basically claiming a significant backdoor in how the TPM stuff actually works for 2.0. So they're basically just sticking with TPM version 1.0, so they don't have to go to it. It basically gives the ability for Microsoft to be able to push anything to a machine, modify it in any way, shape, or form remotely through Microsoft services. So obviously, potentially having the NSA be part of that, you have the ability to push anything to any device you want to through what's considered really a trusted trusted type of technology. So that's one thing on the Microsoft side. When it comes to the other countries and things that may be less desirable to United States business. I mean, there's a lot of countries right now standing up information warfare capabilities, and if you take the Syrian conflict and what's going on there, and I don't want to rehash anything around that, but this is really one of the first type of conflicts, if we went into it, where allies of the opposing country had cyber warfare capabilities, which is a really intriguing thing that we've done because we're so involved in technology on a daily basis that they really have the capabilities of shutting down some core infrastructure that we have. So I really think that it's kind of weird because militarily we obviously have the upper hand, but when it comes to technology, it's no longer about who has the biggest guns. It's really about who has the smartest people and who's willing to use them.
Yeah, that is interesting, and I know that one of the big things in a lot of the Arab Spring conflicts. I spent a little while in Armenia while some of that was going on, so there was good information flow with some of the security and privacy and government experts over there, and I like to pick their brains whenever I get the chance. They said that a lot of those countries' kind of technology leadership in the administrations got together and shared a ton of information. And a lot of it was about surveillance. It was about the techniques of, basically what a nation state does to track down people and groups that they don't like. So if you now take that mentality and that attitude and apply it to a foreign business, maybe. So let's say you're Iran and you want to know what the, what one of the oil companies wants to do coming over to their area. Whether it's in Iran directly or whether it's in one of the neighboring countries or somewhere where they feel they have a sphere of influence. How easy then would it be to use the same ideas and technologies and techniques to infiltrate or to technologically infiltrate one of those oil companies, one of those other businesses that does business in the Middle East?
Yep, and I mean, business-wise, we're quickly seeing the technology that we rely on an everyday basis really starting to shrink and go lower and lower and lower into what we can actually say as being defensible, and that's an interesting dilemma that we have. I mean, we really have to focus on those monitoring and detection capabilities within inside of our own organizations to see if that information's been accessed, to see what's actually happening, because the encryption itself might not be as good as we think it is.
Right. Yeah. It's I've had an idea for a while about some kind of a honey password. Right. You put a password out there that you know is weak or that you pass in clear text just to see if somebody's listening. Because if they go and then try and log into that account or to that password, then automatically you know that there's some communication stream that's been compromised or some database that's been compromised if that honey password or honey account is in.
Yep. Agreed.
So we've talked a lot about nation states potentially being able to use this same cryptography weakening that the NSA has done. What about other organizations? So private companies. There are some private companies that have just as much computing power as the NSA. If you look at, we talked about Microsoft, we talked about Google, Amazon has probably about as much computing power as the NSA. Some of the other really large organizations like that have a lot of that computing power. So if you are a business that either works with them, negotiates contracts, that kind of thing, competes with them directly, certainly, does anything where it's involving some of those organizations that might have the firepower to be able to crack, assuming that the NSA is relying on all their computing power, not just some back door.
Right.
What should businesses be thinking about in terms of their competition or their friends or somebody else who might have some motivation, whether it's negotiation, getting a leg up on pricing, or just beating you to your intellectual property? How concerned should organizations be about their competition and their friends, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, it's a matter of, everything that we've relied on, that are kind of out the window. So, I mean, I don't think competition's necessarily a huge thing because, I think, at least especially in the United States, there's kind of a camaraderie between different groups that are competing against each other. When you go to different states, like, countries like China, things like that, that's when our IP starts really flying out the window. and you really start to lose a lot of those things that make us specifically unique as a country. So you take all of those in consideration. I mean, we really need to start stepping up our game when it comes to security, or else we're going to have some really big problems in the future ahead of time. And the thing that was interesting, I guess, in kind of parlaying it back into the Syrian conflict. I mean, we were grossly unprepared to be able to handle any type of cyber attack, let alone one from organized individuals. It's really going to take businesses to take security very seriously in a number of different areas and integrating it into every business process that you have when it comes to technology, or else again, you're really going to see it happening. And it's no longer when something's going to happen. It's a matter of or I'm sorry, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen. It's a matter of when it's going to happen. And we're seeing that more and more common today.
Yeah, so let's shift a little bit and talk about some of the work that the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, has done. I know you've looked into this, so I'll let you start out. But basically, the EFF has done some really good legal work to get information from the government on what's going on. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, essentially, EFF has been suing the government for releasing they've been suing them to try to get a bunch of information around the surveillance program that's been going on. And most recently, they released hundreds of classified documents around the NSA surveillance, and specifically around the FISA court rulings. And some of the stuff on there, I was looking at, I'm like, really, this is where we're at, in our government. It doesn't. I guess it's not surprising. But basically, long story short, the NSA has been illegally using phone data for a number of years. They have no idea how to handle the amount of data or how to even distinguish it to what should be searched versus what shouldn't be searched. Trevor Tim from the EFF said, incredible. Intelligence officials said today that no one at the NSA fully understands how its own surveillance systems worked at the time, so they could not adequately explain it to the court. To me, this is really alarming, because it really shows what the lack of regulation, the lack of controls that are in place. And I was recently on CNN. It was either CNN or Fox Business. I think it was Fox Business. And I was talking to a colonel there that came from the SIGINT side of the house, and we were kind of going back and forth a little bit on what we thought was right and what we thought was wrong. We had some differences in opinions. One thing that he said resonated with me, which was the signals intelligence realm has a lot of rules and regulations that you have to adhere to. Things that you have to do in order to ensure that it's not a U.S. citizen, to make sure that we're only collecting on specific things that are important for terrorist-related activities. The rules have not caught up yet when it comes to what we can do from an information perspective, and that's really the problem what we're seeing today.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it brings to mind, if the NSA doesn't really have a handle on what information they potentially have, who might have it, what access they might have to that information. I mean, the mere fact that that a lot of this info is leaked out from Edward Snowden, as well as some of the other people who came before him. My question is, what happens if you get somebody who goes rogue within the agency, or within one of their contractors, or with one of those groups, and sells corporate information to a hedge fund or to a business intelligence company? That then makes its way to Wall Street or to maybe a foreign trading house, and they trade based on what's essentially insider, really secret information.
Right.
It's probably not illegal for the trading house to have done that, and yet it could really affect the financials of publicly traded organizations. I haven't heard anybody else speculating about that. But for a long time, I know that there have been some people speculating that some of the information some of the intellectual property that leaks out of U.S. organizations and other global organizations goes into that type of intelligence gathering, that type of intelligence operation that feeds into financial houses, and then they're able to make trades on it. What do you think about that idea?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think I'm in full agreement. I don't have anything really to add to that. It's exactly what I feel.
Okay. Well,
sorry, you hit me on all my topics.
Yeah, the only thing that I've got left to just mention briefly before we close out for today is that Glenn Greenwald on his most recent Twitter feed has posted kind of an open invitation. It was to one individual in particular, but he basically said, hey, look, I've got more information that I can reasonably parse and understand and do good journalism on. So my offer still stands from several months ago. If you want to get involved and help with this, come on in. So we'll post that Twitter tweet in our show notes. If anybody's interested, if anybody feels strongly about the stuff that's happening, you're certainly welcome to send him a direct message on Twitter or to get in contact with him some way to offer your services. And of note, Twitter is one of the companies, one of the few companies that's in that kind of large group of social media providers and other internet infrastructure providers that was not on the list of companies that was leaked that have cooperated with the NSA, from what I remember.
Yep. Yeah, and again, I think, looking at this, from a business stance, I mean, there's some major implications here, not only from the NSA. I mean, I think, us inside the United States, we're like, okay, well, it's the NSA, it's our government, we kind of have that level of trust, and I think that's slowly fading a little bit, at least for some of us. But these same capabilities are available out there to other, governments that are less friendly to us, that are really competing to us neck and neck in our businesses every day. And so we really need to focus on that defensible strategy around security, and that's really ultimately what's going to save us. It's just a matter of being able to make that pitch, be able to change security within an organization, and really make it a security-driven culture.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to end it. The only other thing that I'll just ask for a kind of homework for our viewers and listeners is think about what it does matter to you. And think about, is it important enough that it's something that we need to change? I know that I'll plug the stuff that Josh Corman's group, the Cavalry, is going to be doing at DerbyCon and is currently working on. It's trying to think through those big issues, those really long-term issues that there's not a market solution for, that no companies are going to take and run with this, that a lot of lobbyist groups have not taken on. Maybe it's not the right venue for lobbyist groups to even take on at this point. But if you want to get involved with that, we'll also post links to the way you can get in touch with the Cavalry, as well as some other information on that. And with that, Dave, unless you've got anything else, I think we'll see everybody next time.
See you every next time. Good talking. It's fun.
All right. Bye-bye.